people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Piñeiro.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Set to go down in late March on the undercard of Bork versus Lane. Raven Chapman, one of my favorite unbeaten up-and-comers in the women's featherweight division, will be returning to action opposite the ring Colombia's own Johanna Sarabia in what is a battle of the unbeatens. Unbeaten Raven, unbeaten Johanna. This is for Raven's WBC international title, which could be used as a segue to climb up the ranks and one day fight for the full title that will be on the line in the upcoming Nicholson versus Mahfoud fight. It would seem that Raven and Sky are on a collision course, as Sky Nicholson is set to become a champion very soon. She might, and if she does, so long as Raven stays in character and stays in the winner's bracket, keeps climbing up those ranks, sooner or later Sky's going to have to deal with her. For now, Raven is going to have to deal with Johanna Sarabia, who sports a professional record of 10 wins with no losses, no draws, 6 knockouts. To Raven Chapman's 8 wins with no losses and no draws, 2 recorded knockouts. So on paper, it might look like they're in a similar place in their careers on paper, but you know what I always say? What? There's more to boxing than what you see on paper. Raven's 8-0 is actually very different from Johanna's 10-0. Gotta look at Johanna's resume so far, who she's been keeping busy with, who she's been fighting, what fighters are they matching her against to further her development, and what you're talking about is maybe 2 or 3 girls that were making their pro debut, 6 other girls that had upside-down records, more losses than victories. What does that mean? That means is that you can only develop but so much with that quality of competition and those kinds of fighters that can't really push back, can't really fight back, whereas Raven's opponents, comparatively, they are a bit better. Now, I understand that circumstances may be extenuating for Johanna in a way that they may not be for Raven. That Raven's boxed on major platforms several times already. She's got a major promotional outfit behind her, whereas Johanna, she doesn't. She's just working with what she's got, but the circumstances are what the circumstances are, and we have to look at those circumstances and evaluate. What does any of this have to do with Raven's opponents versus Johanna's opponents? Johanna's a Colombian fighter, based out of Colombia. She hasn't boxed on a major platform. She doesn't have a major promoter behind her, and that can make securing opponents, good ones, decent ones, difficult because you ain't got the money to do that, the resources. Whereas Raven, Raven's boxed at least once on a Matchroom show by my count, and currently she's with Queensberry Promotions. That's saying that she's boxed on DAZN, she's boxed on BT, now called TNT. She has a major promoter behind her. She's got some money behind her, at least more than Johanna. Johanna doesn't have money behind her. Big promotional outfits having boxed on big platforms. Thus, the opponents stay secure for her. They're just working with what they've got. And that isn't a lot. You're talking about what? 2 girls that were making their pro debut. What? About 5 or 6 girls with upside down records. 1 girl that never won a fight. She had 3 pro fights, didn't win 1. The relevance of all this to the conversation is that Johanna's 10-0 isn't better than Raven's 8-0. That Johanna might have 2 more pro fights than Raven does, but I don't actually think she's as experienced as Raven is, as battle-tested, at least so far. That there is more to boxing than what you see on paper. Oddly enough, there's no footage of Johanna on the internet. I know because I checked. I searched all the usual spots, and there's no footage of Johanna in action. I don't know if that's deliberate or because she boxes in very small shows that don't make it to TV. I don't know.
Though even when it comes to small shows, small hall shows in the UK or small shows in America, South America, Central America, you can usually find some footage of a fighter. I couldn't find any of Johanna.
So I don't quite know what Raven is going to have to deal with in late March, but from what I can see, this is somebody who hasn't faced the same level of competition as she has, so she may not be as developed or well prepared.
It's hard to know, but it is intriguing because it is a battle of the unbeatens after all.
And if nothing else, Raven Chapman is made for TV. She's made for television. She's an action fighter, a combination puncher. It's just the next step in her career to coming one step closer to becoming a world champion and challenging for a world title. She's an entertaining fighter to watch. That's reason enough for me to tune in. So we'll see what happens in late March, and we'll see if I can find any footage of Johanna Sarabia.
I think Raven's gonna beat her either way.
In men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news, boxing trainer Breadman Edwards, you might be familiar with that name, he says that David Benavidez has a good chance at dethroning Artur Beterbiev. I really don't know what that's based on.
Based on him working with the PBC a lot and him being a mouthpiece for PBC fighters.
He gives David good odds against Artur Beterbiev. Artur Beterbiev, who's supposed to be sharing the ring with fellow champion Dmitry Bivol in his very next fight. Edwards is giving Beterbiev the slightest edge over Bivol. Although Bivol is a title holder in his own right and a pound-for-pound star, Edwards actually believes that there's another fighter in an entirely different weight class who poses a much bigger threat to Beterbiev. I think David Benavidez is actually a harder fight for Beterbiev, admitted Edwards to BoxingScene.com recently. If Benavidez has the durability, he can probably beat Beterbiev.
Oh, if this. Probably that.
What are you getting so bent out of shape for?
The guy is a shill.
He is.
His professional evaluation has absolutely nothing to do with professional boxing, and it has more to do with who he does business with and who he's partial to. It's a waste of time.
It's nauseating. You're using a buzz around Artur's last fight and his upcoming fight with Dmitry Bivol, two light heavyweight champions, to talk up a super middleweight who's scared to jump into the deep end.
What he's doing, if you read between the lines, why the fuck should I or anybody else look at David Benavidez as a bigger threat to Artur than Dmitry? What the fuck has David done that Dmitry hasn't done?
Tell you what he's done. He's lost his alphabet title 2 times fucking around. That's one thing Dmitry didn't do.
One thing he hasn't done.
On the offensive side of things, Edwards expects the 26-year-old to shine. Defensively, on the other hand, winning and losing will depend on whether his body will hold up. He'll be getting off a lot more in the mid-range. Beterbiev don't have the fastest hands, so Benavidez will be beating him to the punch. It's all a matter of it, if he can take what's going on.
Give me a break.
Why are you so sure that all he's doing is shilling for PBC fighters?
Because that's what he always does. Don't you remember his professional annotations, his analysis of Stephen Fulton ahead of the Inoue fight?
Do you remember what he said? He said well-rounded fighters like Stephen Fulton don't pass the same eyeball test that offensive fighters like Inoue do. But it doesn't mean they can't win. B-Hop versus Tito, Sanchez versus Gomez, and Forrest versus Mosley are examples.
What?
Examples of what?
What?
That your analysis was off base? You described Stephen Fulton as being well-rounded, but what is Inoue?
Because he's not well-rounded? You know, I would sooner categorize Inoue as a well-rounded fighter before Stephen Fulton. And I did, which is why I picked Inoue to beat him.
But it's Stephen Breadman Edwards picked to win the fight. He said, Fulton is much bigger and very skilled. It's not an easy fight for Inoue.
It looked easy to me.
Plus, Fulton has all of the tricks. Mark my words, he will have to dig super deep to beat Fulton if he can beat him at all.
And he did beat him. He beat him, and he didn't have to dig super deep, as Stephen said. No, he had to dig deeper to beat Nonito in their first fight. He had to dig deeper for him than he had to dig for Stephen Fulton. Quite honestly, I don't think he had to dig at all. He beat him up the way he wanted to beat him up from the start to the finish.
My point is, whenever you ask these shills like Stephen Breadman Edwards, who for some reason has amassed a reputation as one of the better boxing minds in boxing today, though for what I don't know.
You know what you're gonna hear. At least I do. Pro-PBC propaganda.
Yep.
Pro-PBC nonsense. Because whenever you put a mic in front of this guy, all he does is start talking up PBC guys.
Yep.
Now he's talking up David.
He's using Two light heavyweight champions. Light heavyweights.
Yep.
David doesn't campaign at light heavyweight. Two light heavyweight champions. David's not a reigning champion. They are. He's using them and their upcoming fight to talk about him and talk him up. He's using them to promote this fighter that if he wanted to campaign as a light heavyweight, he could have.
He could have moved up there a long time ago. Look at the screen, you fucking idiot.
It was in the summer of 2020 that Samson Lukowicz, David's longtime promoter, posted this to his Instagram page. It was in the summer of 2020 that David lost his WBC title, not the first, but for the second time. The first time, it was because they found cocaine in his system. They found out this guy was treating his nose, and they stripped him of the belt. That was the first time. The second time, it was because he blew the weight. A portion of Samson Lukowicz's lengthy paragraphs read, after failing to make weight for what would have been his first defense of the WBC title against Romer Angulo on August 15th, the WBC graciously installed Benavidez as their #1 contender at light heavyweight. This is in 2020. And do you know who the WBC champion was in 2020? Same guy it is right now, 2024. Artur Beterbiev.
They made David the #1 contender via the WBC for Artur Beterbiev's WBC title. That if Team Benavidez were as confident in him as Stephen Breadman Edwards is, they would have stayed up there. They fast-tracked you to a title.
Fast-tracked him to a title shot because David was elevated to the #1 spot, having not fought as a light heavyweight, skipping ahead in the queue ahead of everybody in those ranks, everybody who was already there, paying their sanctioning fees, all because David missed the weight. And instead of using that to their advantage to fight Artur, they halt-tail back down to 168. Lukowicz said he's requesting the WBC place Benavidez in the super middleweight ratings in a position where he can secure an elimination fight and start the road to regaining his championships. You could have regained your championship at 175. You could have fought for a title up there. Saw about becoming a 2-division champion, but in the end, you didn't want to do that. Not if you had to go through Artur to do it. Now, maybe if somebody else was WBC champion, somebody who's not as strong, powerful, and dominant as Artur. Perhaps if it was somebody else, Team Benavidez would have been more receptive to this. But all they did was haul-tail back down to super middleweight. No, you can't use the name of Canelo Alvarez as an excuse because Canelo wasn't even a champion there yet.
Wasn't there yet. Didn't hold a full title there yet.
So maybe now you can better understand why Stefan's evaluation of Beterbiev versus Benavidez fight. Maybe you can understand now why it agitates me. Because that fight should have became a reality, and it didn't. And the only reason you're talking up this guy is because of his affiliation with the PBC and yours.
You're full of shit.
You're full of it. You're just using a buzz around those two guys to try to promote him, knowing damn well he's not going to fight either of them. What usually happens to a PBC fighter when you put him in a ring against the top-ranked guy? Does Vosdick versus Stevenson ring a bell? Fury versus Wilder? 2, 3?
Crawford versus Diaz. Crawford versus Porter. Crawford versus Spence.
Inouye versus Fulton. Do you want me to go on? John Scully, former fighter turned assistant trainer to Artur Beterbiev. He said, I don't see that as a hard fight for Artur. I think he's made for Artur. And I happen to agree. Not because John said it, but because that's how I've always felt. There's nothing special about David Benavidez. He's just big for his weight.
That's it.
That's the main thing he's got going for him.
That's it.
I don't see that as a hard fight for Artur, Scully said of Benavidez in an interview with FightHype.com. Honestly, I think he's made for Artur. If you could say, who shouldn't fight Artur Beterbiev?
Who shouldn't fight Artur?
It would be him. I don't think that style, being strong, coming on later, you're not going to do that with Artur. Artur wrote that book. He wrote the book. He's the prototype of the strong guy who gets stronger as the fight goes on. I don't see it. I don't see it. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't see Benavidez as this huge obstacle for Artur. I don't see that at all.
Me neither.
David Benavidez and Artur Beterbiev are both mid-range to inside pressure fighters and volume punchers. But David is a lower grade, a lower tier, a lower caliber of pressure fighter than Artur is. It's the difference between, say, an Isaac Cruz and a William Zepeda?
Yeah.
A more glaring example would be the difference between a Roman Villa and a Chocolatito. You see how much Chocolatito has accomplished being a mid-range to inside pressure fighter and volume puncher. But he's more than just that. He's got other bells and whistles that a Roman Villa doesn't have. The same can be said about David Benavidez and Artur Beterbiev. Yeah, they're both pressure guys, but David is a lot more simple. And all he's really got going for him, to be honest with you, is that he's very big for his weight, and he seems to have a great engine. But he's not at 168 what Artur is at 175.
What makes you say that?
Well, for starters, I don't think Caleb Plant would be able to go the distance with Artur Beterbiev. We can start there. I don't think for a second that Caleb Plant would see the 12th round if he were in there with Artur Beterbiev. And you're going to get a lot of the Benavidez people bringing up the referee. Oh, the referee, the clinches, the constant holding. Yeah, that wouldn't work on Artur. You could have 2, 3 referees in the ring.
That wouldn't help. That wouldn't save him if you're of the opinion that the referee is the reason that Caleb saw the final round. Even I don't agree with that. I just don't think David's that good.
I don't think he's that strong. Oh, maybe he looks strong when he's fighting former junior middleweights like Demetrius Andrade or former middleweights like David Lemieux, but in a very general sense, he doesn't have as much punching power as Artur Beterbiev or as much boxing acumen. Remember, Artur's not just a strong puncher. He comes from a deep amateur background. David doesn't.
David's an accumulation puncher. He tries to beat you into submission with volume. He's not a one-hitter quitter guy.
I like to say that he's the kind of fighter, he gets stronger as the fight progresses. He wouldn't get stronger with Artur. The damage he would sustain in that fight is more than he's ever seen. And David Benavidez, he's never actually fought a puncher. He didn't fight any of the punchers at 168 pounds, whereas Artur, he's fought the punchers at 175. Anthony Yard is a puncher, Callum Smith is a puncher, Joe Smith is a puncher, Vosdick was a puncher, he put Stevenson in the hospital. He almost killed him.
Artur beat him into submission, and that was years ago. Artur has fought way more punchers at 175 than David has at 168.
It's a serious question. It's the hardest puncher David fought at 168. How does whoever that is compare with the hardest puncher Artur's fought at 175? It's a funny statistic that most people don't realize.
What?
David Benavidez, Dmitry Bivol, and Artur Beterbiev all became world champions in the same year, years ago, back in 2017. Since then, Dmitry has successfully defended his WBA title, 9, maybe 10 times, maybe more? Artur, not only has he successfully defended his IBF, he's added both the WBC and WBO titles to it, whereas David, what the fuck has David done with the time? Who has he fought?
Now, after all these years, we're on the eve of Undisputed at 175, and David hasn't had so much as one unification match at 168. He had the chance. Caleb was right there. He was unbeaten. They could have did it.
But you wait good up until Canelo knocks that guy out to fight him afterwards, thinking that what? You're supposed to get the same credit that he got for it?
Let me make a long story short. I don't think David Benavidez is in Artur Beterbiev's league. I think if you put David in there with Artur Beterbiev, he gets knocked out. You ain't got the ingredients.
David is basic. And he'd be fish food at light heavyweight.